This is David Giles of High-Text Development Tools, and this is a short introduction to using user code within the TESSY Unit Testing tool. This is part 1 of 2. Okay, so we're in the TESSY Unit Testing tool environment at the moment, and we're going to create some tests using the user code. I'm assuming that you already have a rough working knowledge of TESSY, so I'm not going to spend too much time going through the basics. Okay, so what I've done here is I've created a new module for ourselves called string example, and today I'll be using for the purposes of running the test the GNU GCC tool for the purposes of compiling and running the tests, and I have one C source file called print_string.c. When I open the module, TESSY has correctly identified that there are two functions contained within it, one of which is called rs232 print string and the other one of which is called hello world. We can have a quick look at the C source file. So if I do edit source file, we can have a quick look at the code that's contained within it, and as you can see here, I have two functions, one of which is called rs232 print string, which basically takes one input parameter which is a pointer to a string, and the second function I have is called hello world. And looking down here, we also have one external function which is called rs232 print byte. So the two functions that we're going to test are these two here. The first one is the rs232 print string, which, as indicated in the function prototype, is a pointer to a string. It has no return parameter from this function, so we have one input parameter and we have 0 return parameters. So this is a rather interesting one for us to test. You'll notice that through the code what we're doing is we're indexing the string, so we're going through the string byte by byte. So while my string index is not equal to 0, so it's looking for the null terminator at the end of the string. And if it's not found a null terminator, it calls this external function which we have called print byte. The second function that we have has no input parameters at all, and it has no return parameters either. So we're going to attempt to test these now with the TESSY Unit Testing tool. Each of these two functions which you see listed here is called a test object. And what we're going to do is test rs232. So I come up onto the interface. Let's have a quick look and see what TESSY's actually made of this function. TESSY has correctly identified that there's one input parameter which is a pointer to a string which is *myString. TESSY has already identified that external function. TESSY has also correctly identified that there's one function called rs232 byte, which has been identified as being external. This is a function for which TESSY does not have the source code for. So I can create a stub function for this. So if I do right click and I do create a stub for the current test object, so you'll see by selecting a local stub function we get a little tick symbol and a capital L next to it to indicate that we have a local stub function for this particular test object. So I'll close this down and we'll create our first test object for ourselves. Add test case. This is the first test case. So, and as you can see, we have the input parameter which is a pointer to my string, but of course we don't actually have a target to point to. So I can create a made up parameter as if we were passing this parameter to the function. And I do this by highlighting create target value, and as you can see here, TESSY allows me to create a dummy string to pass to this function that we're testing. So we'll have something like my test string, so we'll have an array of size of 12 characters, and if I just open this up and show all the elements within the string, as you can see we have nothing contained within there at the moment. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize that array. So I'll enter now a string to go into that array. I'll call it my test string. I'm not sure how many characters I've got. My test string, so I'm missing the G off the end because I don't have enough space within the array, but that will be good enough for us to do with the first test. and as you can see, TESSY has filled in this dummy string array that we're going to pass to the function that we're looking to test. Rather interestingly, we have no return parameters on the right hand side, so the classical way of using TESSY to look at output parameters is not relevant to us because we have no return parameters from the function. But we can still test this function. So if I close down the test data editor, we have to test that the pointer to that string which contains that made up string array has been passed correctly. So if I come up into the user code editor, we have the facilities to do this. As you can see here, we have test case number 1. So when you notice when we come into the user code test editor, we have the rs232 print byte function listed. Now what this allows us to do is it allows us to mimic that external function which we created a local stub for. So what I can do is in this block below the function prototype is create some code to mimic that particular function. So in this particular case, I'll do if ts underscore current test case equals 1, because we're doing the current test case, and basically what we're going to do is we're going to cycle through each of those elements within the array that we're dumping to this function, and we're going to check to make sure that we kind of have the right character. So I can use some built-in parameters. So as you can see, I've already used one which is ts underscore current test case, and I have another one which is ts underscore call count. If call count equals 1, then I'd expect that first parameter to be equal to 1. So by right clicking the mouse button, I can bring up all of the evaluation macros. So in this case, I'm going to evaluate a signed char. This is the standard format for an evaluation macro. Here we have a text block, so in here I can put character, for example, which is just a text string. So I can have character 1, and then the actual character, which is the name that's passed to us through here. This is the name of the parameter, and this is the actual one. So I can have if the character and the operator would be equal, and the expected result would be on call count number 1 would be my m for my test string. Okay, so if ts call count is 1, so the first character that's passed to this external function is equal to the letter m, then we would consider that a success. And similarly, when we call this function for the second time, when the call count is 2, we would expect the second character to be a lowercase y, as in my test string. So we can do this for all the other elements. So I do if call count is 3 equals, I think this time it's a capital T, is 4, character 4. I won't do all of them, but you kind of get the idea. So there we have test case number 1 and call count 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's just checking the first 4 elements that's been passed to that array. What I could do is I could do all of them, all 10. And I click on save, and I come out of the user code editor, and I click on the razor cat symbol, and this will basically generate the driver and run the tests. So I click on execute, and hopefully if I've written all the code correctly within the user code editor, then this should pass okay. Now the test executes, and you'll notice now that we have a green icon which has a small attachment to it, which would suggest that there's some user code, and they both have turned green. So now when I open the user code editor again, so when I hover over the rs232 print byte stub function, you get a little tool help which gives us some indication as to what the parameters are. So as you can see here, character 1, character 2, character 3 and character 4. These are the text blocks which I included within the macro. So we have the actual value, which is in the first case of character 1 is OX4D, that's the actual value passed, and that equals to the expected parameter, which was OX4D, so therefore we have a pass. So when I close down the user code editor and I come up into the report and I generate a HTML report, and contained within the test report are the bits of information which we require. And when we come into the test report and we have a look at test case number 1, we can see here these are the parameters which we have. So in the test string, we had a total of 12 characters, which is my test stri and then a null terminator on the end, and then we actually tested only the first 4 characters of this. So you can see that the actual value and the expected values match, so therefore we have a successful test case with respect to that. And we also have 100% MCDC coverage for that. If we come back into TESSY, we can create additional test cases as well. So I can hit the insert key and I can create another test case. I can create another dummy string, create target value of an array. In this case I'll make it just say 5 characters long, show all the elements, and then enter a string. Enter a string here, so I just type in hello, HELO, plus the null terminating string. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 ASCII characters and the null terminator on the end. And to just double check that one works okay, what I can do is in the user code editor under RS232 print byte, again I can have a similar arrangement to kind of what I have here. I can highlight all of the code, do a simple Control C and a Control V, and then I can change for TS underscore current test cases 2, and now we have call counts 1, 2, 3 and 4. Here I would have to change the ASCII characters to the new expected values, which is HELO, and then click on save and come out the user code editor, highlight both the test cases, click on the razor cat symbol, generate driver and run, click on execute, and as you can see we have 2 passed test cases. And again, when I highlight the user code editor and hover over the print byte function, you can see that we now have the results for test case number 1 and test case number 2. I'll close that down. Okay, so that completes the testing for the first function, RS232 print string.